Hello. Today I'm very lucky to have the opportunity to be interviewing Apuk Ayuel. Hi, Apuk Ayuel. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview.
Hello, Mildred. It's my pleasure and delight to be here with you this evening.
All right. Now, tell us a little about yourself and your background.
Um, I am from South Sudan. I was born and raised in Sudan. And then, because of the civil war that was happening in our country, we traveled to basically immigrate out of the country. We went to Egypt, and then we were resettled here with my family in 1996. Um, so I basically grew up in the U.S. also. I attended school here. I currently work as a diplomat for the government of South Sudan. But I think the reason for this interview is that I'm also a writer.
All right. So tell us, when did you decide to write, and why do you write?
For me, writing was a natural thing. I don't think that it was ever a decision. When I came here as a teenager, just the struggles of assimilation and the struggles of being in a new setting just kind of drove me to write. I just started writing reflections about things that I was experiencing, but also about the nostalgia that I had for being back home. And when we came here first in the 90s, it wasn't like it is right now. There were few families here. I think we were the only family here. So I didn't have any friends. So writing became my friend, my best friend.
That's powerful. So, do you read much? And if you do, which are your favorite books?
I read quite a lot. And I read basically varied genres. I read everything from politics to economics to religion and also novels. Um, in my genre of interest, which is poetry and also literature, I very much like Alice Walker, the African American writer, and I also like Toni Morrison. Actually, my favorite novel for a long time has been Beloved by Toni Morrison. And the reason being is because she writes quite vividly. I remember being able to see everything that she tells in her stories, in that story in particular, in my mind. It was a movie in my mind before I saw the movies. So she's one of my favorite authors. There's a Nigerian author by the name of Ben Okri. He's also quite a vivid writer. And one of my favorite books by him is called The Famished Road. In terms of poetry, of course, Maya Angelou. I love her writing because it's so simple and it's so just, it's so real. She speaks about the emotions and she speaks about just normal struggles that people go through. Also, one of my favorites is Khalil Gibran. There is a book by him called The Prophet. It's one of my all-time favorite poetry books. And he is a Lebanese American writer. So I cannot live without reading. I think if I'm not reading, then it's most of the time is indicative of the fact that maybe I'm quite stressed in my life or I'm quite not at ease. If I'm reading, I'm at ease.
So, what do you normally do when you're rather stressed?
I think writing has always been an outlet for me. I think, and maybe in the near future you'll be able to see some of my writing, but it's basically whatever that is going inside of me, be it turmoil, joy, stress, or even just kind of thoughts and considerations, somehow it finds its way to my pen, and to my paper. So writing is almost like breathing. Yeah, it's
That's
really
deep.
important. It's really important to me.
So, are you working on something at the moment? And if you are, what are you working on? We want to know.
Yes. Well, this has been a long time coming. I think a couple of years coming. I'm finally publishing a collection of poems. It's going to be called "They Called Me Kush."
They called me Kush.
Yes.
Interesting. I love that title. All right, tell us more about that.
The title actually is from a poem that I wrote in 2008. It was I was requested to perform a poem at a youth concert, South Sudanese youth concert that was happening in Washington, D.C. And I decided that I wanted to highlight basically the history of Africa in one poem. But not only the history of the struggles of Africa, but also focusing on the hope that Africa has in its youth. So this poem, when I was trying to gather my poetry together into a book, I was kind of thinking about having, I had like two genres in one. I had poems that had to do with South Sudan political struggles, people's struggles and people's aspirations in South Sudan, and then I also had quite a chunk that had to deal with, softer issues of love, beauty, reflections on spirituality and things like that. So for me to kind of combine them together, I was struggling with a title. But because I am South Sudanese, I am Kush, and I'm talking about country and people. So for me, that title united everything together, and it just somehow became the right match for the book, for the collection.
Wow, that's awesome. So, tell us what is your favorite book?
Huh. I think that's the one of the most difficult questions to answer because I have a lot of I think it's like reading or interacting with books. Basically, it's like you're consuming food, and there are so many aspects of me, and so I need so many different aspects of the food that I consume in terms of books. And so for spirituality, I have favorite books. But when it comes to poetry, I have favorite books. When it comes to political thought and economics and things like that, I have favorite books. One of my favorite authors is actually you call him probably a psychoanalyst, a psychopolitical analyst. His name is Frantz Fanon, and he was quite a force in terms of issues of decolonization in Africa. He actually even moved and was fighting with the Algerian people at one point for their independence. So one of his books deals with this whole issue of race as a construct of the colonial system. It's called Black Skin, White Mask. So this is one of my favorite books by him, and there's another one called The Wretched of the Earth. And so these books are basically books that I read over and over again, but it's only one genre. I have other favorite books in other genres. Another one of my favorite authors is Sheikh Anta Diop, because I'm really interested in the history of our people, the history of Africa. And because of the life that we lived as refugees, we kept moving from one country to another. I never really got the chance to learn about the history of South Sudan or the history of Africa through schools. So I had to utilize these books to kind of educate myself. And so these books are treasures for me because it somehow rooted me back into my culture. Although I grew up here, I have so much knowledge about Africa and so much connection.
Yeah, I agree with that. Personally, I think nowadays I actually learn more, via the internet.
Yeah.
I think that helps a lot, with our younger generation,
Yeah.
learn more than we actually get from
I
schools.
think for me, I really actually started avidly reading after I graduated college. And when I moved to Washington, D.C., I thankfully, they had a quite a great public transportation system. They had a metro, so I commuted 40 minutes to work and 40 minutes back. And every time I was in the metro, I had a new book. I had a book that I was reading, and so sadly, education here does not really give you a wide range of knowledge. And not only that, is for us as Africans and for us as black people living here, we are not taught our history. In the history books here, we are not reflected in a good light. So it's important for us to ground ourselves in our identity and to have pride of that identity for us to actually research for ourselves and read for ourselves and educate ourselves. And I think for the youth, I think reading is the best thing you can do, is the best investment that any youth can do for themselves because it widens your horizon quite a bit and it nourishes you. It nourishes your being, your character, your identity. Yeah.
Agree. Absolutely. So, tell us your favorite motivational phrase and quote.
My favorite quote, and I think it's something that actually motivates me quite a lot. It says, it's by Rumi, and it says, let the beauty of what you love be what you do. And to me, it's quite important because, you know, I think as human beings, we seek happiness. Happiness is the ultimate thing that drives us in everything that we do. And it's important for us that in everything that we do, we should derive joy from it. So if you're doing, just imagine, like when I'm writing, I'm alive. When I'm writing, I'm alive. But is it necessary that when I'm working, I'm alive? It's important that, the work that we do be what it is that we love and be what it is that we kind of drive happiness from. So I know it's kind of difficult to do that because you have to basically get money and be able to pay your bills. But in the same time, I think it's important to invest in the things that you love and invest in the things that basically gives you the most happiness. And for me, writing is that because I will do it even if I'm not paid for it. For a long time, I never considered even publishing because I was writing for myself. And when other people started noticing or knowing that I write, they started motivating me and saying, "This is really great. You need to share it."
Sharing is caring.
That's what they say. Yeah.
So, that being said, do you ever get a writer's block? And if you do you have any tips for us on how to overcome that?
I think it's. I'm not sure if I agree with 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 the terminology. I don't know if it kind of applies to me because I think writer's block for me is like when writing is a chore, then you want to write and you're not able to write because writing became a chore, a job, something that you need to do, something that you are obligated to do. But for me, my writing is never a chore for me. My writing is something that just comes. And so, but in the same time, it doesn't mean that I'm writing all the time. Because I think there are situations when I have like a long time without writing. And I don't necessarily worry about it because I don't have any deadline on my head. There's nobody telling me you must write by this deadline, so I'm not really stressed about it. I think when when you have the deadlines and you have the writer's block, then the more stress you get about not being able to write, the more compounded your writer's block becomes. For me, I think is it's like I try as best as possible to write from the heart. So if it's not coming, it's not there. So I don't need to force it. But in the same time, it's like, sometimes we hold our breath. It's natural. Sometimes we live in a way that we are, for whatever reason, whatever forces that are happening around us, we hold our breath. And it's not good for you to hold your breath. But sometimes we breathe in a shallow way. It's the same to me with writing. Sometimes I don't write. Sometimes, and it's okay with me because until it comes, then it's the right time.
That's right. Okay, so what advice would you give your younger self?
My younger self. I think I would. I would, if I can go back in time, I think I would advise her to just be more grounded in herself. And this is my advice to the youth. Be grounded in who you are. You don't have to. You don't have to fulfill other people's expectations. No, take the time to know yourself and to know your talents and your aspirations, and do your best to fulfill your own expectations. Because I think, and this is a quote that I keep using, happiness is a function of your expectations. So the most important thing is to be happy with yourself. And you can only be happy with yourself if you're fulfilling your own expectations. I think society, our parents, our siblings, our friends, like they put a lot of, it puts a lot of expectations on us, and it puts a lot of limitations on what we could be. And so if we accept that, then, we will not be true to ourselves. And it's important that we be true to ourselves. There's one quote, I'm butchering all these quotes, but there is...
Fine, that's fine. We want to hear more. I'm sure our audience wants to hear more.
I wouldn't allow you to butcher my quotes, though, but...
Okay, we'll try our best not to. Okay.
So basically, it says the richest place in the world is a cemetery. Because in the cemetery are buried all the unwritten books and all the unfulfilled dreams and all the talents that are wasted. So as youth, do not waste your talent, fulfill your own expectations, and do first things first. Do not be consumed by what you need to do tomorrow. If you know what your dream is, do the things that you need to do today, and you'll be able to be there when tomorrow comes, so for you to reap the benefits.
In other words, live today, live tomorrow for tomorrow. All right, now, what advice would you give our aspiring writers?
Aspiring writers. If you're a writer, you're a writer. I don't like the word aspiring next to it. Maybe aspiring authors for publication. But I would say there are many untold stories, and there are many angles from which we tell a story. It's really important for all of us to give our versions of the stories, for us to write. It's important for us to write about current events. It's important for us to write about our history. I think as South Sudanese, in particular, there is not much literature. I live in South Sudan, and our children in elementary schools or in middle schools or even in higher education, most of the literature that we consume and that we read and are taught in school are from our neighboring countries like Uganda and Kenya. And it's good that we are able to utilize that in the meantime, but we need to be grounded in our values and in our cultures. And it's important for us to write the literature that our children will be able to read, and it's important for us to shape the minds of the citizens of future South Sudan. So I think keep on writing, and the story, and share your stories is important. Let's not be shy like I have been, but share your stories.
All right, awesome. Now, I'm very curious about this book of yours. So, tell us a little bit more about this book of yours, and if you are publishing it, how are you publishing it, and where can we find more details on how to get the book?
My book is called They Called Me Kush. I decided to go the self-publishing route because of many reasons. But one of the main reasons is that I live a very hectic life, and my work doesn't allow me for much time to be able to devote into dealing with publishers and seeking publishers. But another reason is it gives me creative control. So it will be published by the end of the year. It's going to be available on Amazon.com. And I think I will also be doing a launch. If people want to follow me, they can follow me on Instagram at Apuk Ayuel, or at Twitter on the same at Apuk Ayuel. Thank you.
Now, is there anything else you would like to add that I haven't included?
I just want to applaud Youth Empowering Societies Through Service for the wonderful initiative of supporting and empowering artists, young artists in our community. I just want to again reassure you of my support, and I look forward for future cooperation with you guys. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Apuk Ayuel. Again, you can find her on Twitter. She's on Twitter at Apuk Ayuel, and on Instagram at Apuk Ayuel as well. Thank you so much for your